name is Georgiana Adams, and I'm a senior here at DePaul University studying vocal performance. I am joined here today by a wonderful teacher whom I have had the pleasure to study with. And please help me in welcoming Dr. Chuck Chandler. Dr. Chandler, how are you today?
Hello, Georgie. I'm doing very well. How are you?
Good, I'm doing all right. We are very excited to have you. And Dr. Chandler, you are a new addition to our DePaul Voice and faculty. And we are so excited to have you here and learn more about you today.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here for sure.
Yeah. So, everyone has their different paths on how they got into music. Some people have musical families, some people stumble upon music. And, we were wondering growing up what kind of influences you had that led you to the path of music.
I have a musical family, but perhaps not in a typical way you might expect a musical family to yield an opera singer and a voice teacher. My grandmother, on my mother's side, was a country singer when she was young, and she sang backup and did some singing on the radio and things like that. And she gave up on a singing career for raising a family at the time. And then growing up when I was young, I remember, so I wasn't really around that part of my family's musical history. But growing up, I remember my mother singing a lot as a kid. We had this recreation room, and she had a big stereo system, and she loved music, and she sang all the time. And so I was around that as a young person. Then, indirectly in my life, I started singing in my church choir, and I also started singing in my high school chorus at the same time. And so I kind of fell in love with choral singing. I remember vividly the first time that I heard a major chord in only human voices, and I was in the room. It was in the ensemble that I was in, and it was magical to me. And so I fell in love with choral singing first myself, and had some wonderful teachers when I was in high school. Part of that experience was I went to sing at a festival with my chorus, and as a part of that trip, we were taken to see Les Mis on Broadway in New York City, and that was the first musical I had ever seen. And I remember it because there's a moment in that show when Jean Valjean sings "Bring Him Home," and I was just so inspired at that point in the show that I thought, this is what I have to do. I have to sing and be in the music world. And so it started with choral music, and then I saw a musical theater show. I saw Les Mis, fell in love with it, started taking some voice lessons. And my teacher in high school gave me some musical theater tunes as well as some art songs. And I really fell in love with classical singing in my voice lessons as well. And so all of my teachers kind of were very savvy. They caught wind of this, that I was really interested in music and had a little bit of an inclination to be good at it. And so they encouraged me to major in music in college. And so I did, of course. And back in the Stone Age, when I grew up, the internet wasn't really widespread yet. And so I couldn't go to Google and say, where are the best music schools in the US? So I really had to rely on my teachers. And as I said, I had some wonderful teachers early on. So they steered me in the right direction, and I wound up doing my undergraduate degree at Florida State University. There I had the pleasure of studying with some world-renowned singers and world-renowned teachers. And so as a part of that experience, I discovered there I actually started college as a music education major because I always knew that I wanted to teach. And so as a part of that experience, one of my teachers asked me at one point, do you think you want to maybe be a performance major? And I had never considered it. I always knew that like I said, that I wanted to teach. And so that's why I was in the music education degree. And so I went home after that lesson. I thought about that question. Why would I want to be a vocal performance major? Do I want to be a vocal performance major? And it occurred to me that what I loved about music at that point in my life was the physical sensations of singing. I loved how it felt to sing, still do. And so I went back to my teacher and I said, well, I really want to teach. So can I do what you do? What's the path to becoming a voice teacher at the collegiate level? And she laid it out very simply, and she said graduate school, getting a doctorate, having some professional experience. And so it all just kind of unfolded from there.
said you're on year 12 of teaching. That's wonderful. What is your favorite thing about teaching voice at the collegiate level?
That's a hard question to answer with just one favorite thing. I love teaching, and as I said before, it's what I always knew that I wanted to do. I'm a little bit of an introvert, and I love singing, but I don't feel the need necessarily to be in the spotlight and to be the center of attention. What I do love is investing in other people, and so for me, um, teaching voice is a way to invest in others, to invest in the future of what we do as artists. I will also say selfishly, it's really fun to watch a high school age student come to college for the first time and be a first year student and develop over the course of 4 or 5 years into a young artist. It is so fun to watch that happen. Um, and so being a part of that journey feels very rewarding and fulfilling to me. Um, and then there's also the aspect of teaching that I love is that putting good into the future. It's a positive that feels really rewarding to me, and so I think being in an environment like DePaul, where the community is there, the positivity, the sense of support and nurturing is there, to be able to continue pouring into that and investing in it's really wonderful, and it's something I enjoy very, very much.
Just to get to know a little more about you as a teacher, how would you describe your teaching style and your philosophy as a teacher and your personality while teaching?
I think there are many different kinds of learners, and so first and foremost, I try to be as adaptable as possible. I think that giving every student what they need is the best approach and the most fair approach. But in terms of my demeanor in the studio and also in the classroom, I don't believe in negativity. I think that it doesn't have a constructive purpose in learning. And so I'm very positive, I am very constructive, I have very high standards for my students, but I don't use negativity in any way to help get them there because I don't think that it's helpful. You know, as artists, we need to feel safe and willing to experiment and risk and make mistakes to learn. And if there is negativity in the learning environment, that makes young singers far less willing to put themselves out there. So I try to be very positive and very constructive while still maintaining high professional standards for my students. And in terms of my teaching philosophy, I think that singing is, as I said, it's really about skills acquisition. What we do as singers is based on physical coordinations, and all voices who learn those physical coordinations through the process of learning them become able to sing the entirety of their pitch range. And so you can sing your high voice, you can sing to your lowest notes and everything in between. Become able to sing the entirety of our dynamic range, so we have the fullness of our dynamics and everything in between. And additionally, we become able to sing passages of music that require us to sustain the voice, and also passages of music that require us to move the voice. So it's really those 6 things that are kind of the outcome. And rather than focusing on, today we're going to learn how to sing sostenuto, that's an outcome focused learning endeavor. Whereas I tend to focus on the physical process that would enable a singer to sing sostenuto if that were the goal. In terms of my teaching philosophy, it is focusing on the technical part of the aspects of singing, the physical activity of it, and learning the physical coordinations upon which singing is based, that enable a young singer to have their whole voice with them and to be able to handle anything in the repertoire that they're going to sing. As well, when a singer learns those things, you get to that point, your voice type emerges. A lot of young singers want to know what they are, and that can be sometimes the first 2 questions I often get are, what kind of voice am I, and how can I sing a beautiful high C? And the answer to both of those questions is you have to go through this process to learn to come to understand both of those things. And so that's my primary focus, is the physicality, the physical coordinations upon which singing is based that yield those things like your voice type, your ability to sing high and low, loud and soft, sostenuto and coloratura. And I do it in a learning environment that is very nurturing, very supportive, but also holds very high standards. In fact, if I can, early on in my career, I had a student who it was clear had a very, very unusual talent. And I thought, this is a great responsibility. I've always felt like teaching is a responsibility because when a student comes to you and says, I want to be a voice teacher or an opera singer or a music educator, and I want you to teach me, that's a big responsibility to help them achieve their goals. But this student in particular wanted to be an opera singer, had the raw talent, and so it was very clear that the responsibility was there for me. So I invested in that student in those same ways. We were positive, we were constructive. I gave him as much technique as I could, and I think it was 3 years after he graduated from his undergraduate degree. He was one of the national finalists in the Metropolitan Opera National Council auditions. And he was studying with a voice teacher at the time who was quite old. And I'd kept in touch with this student. So when I saw he made grand finals, I sent him a message and I said, are you going to have somebody there for you that week? That process, the singers, under normal circumstances, the singers go to New York and they do semifinals at the Met. They spend the week there. They do finals at the Met as well. And a lot of the singers that get there, they have some support that they bring with them. Their teachers, their coaches, their families, their friends, whomever. And so I asked him if he was going to have some support, and he said, no, I'm just coming up. I'm going to do my thing. And I said, I'm going to get on a plane if you're okay with that. And he said, yeah, come on up. That'd be great. So I had the good fortune and the privilege of sitting at the Met, watching my former student come out and sing the National Grand Finals. And when they announced his name as one of the winners that year, I could not have been happier for him. That was one of the most exciting moments in my teaching career, not because of anything that I had done, because by this point, like I said, the student had graduated and he had been out for a few years, but to watch someone that I had invested in achieve something so wonderful for himself, it was a real joy for me. And I think I cried when they announced his name just a little bit because I was so happy for him. And so that's the way that I approach teaching. It's out of care for my students and their futures, out of a desire for their success. And I approach it through positivity, through being constructive, and through giving them the physical principles upon which singing is based, rather than trying to say, you should be able to get this musical outcome.
What is one role that would make you feel like you have really accomplished what you set out to do? Your one dream role?
My dream role, ever since I heard La Boheme, has been Rodolfo. And much to my chagrin, I'm on the lighter side of the spectrum of tenor voices in the world, and so there's too much brass in that orchestra for me. So I'm not marketable as a Rodolfo, unfortunately. So it's a dream role that I will never sing, and so that sense of fulfillment in doing my dream role, that's probably never going to happen. And but I came to terms with that a long time ago. It's still something I pull that aria out and sing it from time to time because we all love it. It's so beautifully written with the lyricism and the sweeping vocal lines. So maybe a more realistic dream role, something I actually would sing. I would love to sing Evangelist in the Bach St. John Passion. It's all recitative. It's musically challenging and really rich and fulfilling. It's texts that are all translations of the Bible, and I think that the musical challenge of I love recitative, and so the musical challenge of singing Evangelist would be really, really fun to sink my teeth into. And that kind of repertoire in particular, singing Bach, things that sit a little bit higher, right up my alley vocally. So it is a dream role I could actually sing, unlike Rodolfo, and something that I think I would really feel enjoyable and fulfilling for the content and also for the musical experience.
Wonderful. Yeah, those are wonderful roles and works that you mentioned. Now, kind of going off of that, what music and what style of music in particular are you drawn to when performing?
Oh wow, that's a great question. I I have a secret love for musical theater because it's what hooked me as a young singer. And I still sometimes listen to musical theater, and I still sing show tunes. And in fact, in some of my previous teaching positions, I had a studio full of students, some of whom were classical in classical degrees, and some of whom were in musical theater degrees. So I have taught some musical theater in the past as well. I also have a secret passion for 90s R&B and hip hop. That was some of the music that I grew up with in a more popular idiom. And so I have playlists and things that are amalgams of all my favorite 90s R&B tunes. So I go back and listen to that sometimes. I love the 80s and 70s songs and bands that I used to hear my mother sing. And so I listened to Journey, I listened to the Eagles, Creedence Clearwater Revival, those sort of folk singers from the 70s. James Taylor is a singer that I love. And so there's some pop music certainly that I have an affinity for. There's some musical theater, and then because my primary career is in classical singing, the styles that I love, I think the most as a classical singer, anything that moves. I love singing coloratura. The faster the better. Early on, when I was first singing professionally, I would go and do Messiah gigs really frequently. And most conductors wouldn't believe me when I told them what my tempo was for every valley. They'd say, "No, we can't go that fast." And I love singing anything that moves fast. I do enjoy Baroque music because it tends to have a lot of coloratura in it, and it's a good tessitura for my voice. I love singing bel canto lines. That lyricism is it's good for the voice. It's like honey and medicine for your throat as a singer, and it's just beautiful music. It's expressive, but it's also kind of spare. When you look at like a Bellini art song, for instance, the vocal line isn't terribly ornate in most cases. Sometimes there are embellishments and things that Bellini wrote in, but that spare nature of the writing means that we as artists have to kind of pour into it our interpretation, our expression, and that's what allows us to share some part of the human condition with our audience. So I love bel canto music as well, and I might say that you asked me about my favorites, and I'm giving you like a long, long list. Clearly, I don't like music at all, right? So in other styles, still classical though. I love Mozart and I love Bach. There's something so elegant about Mozart, the way that he wrote for the voice. And likewise with Bach, I think he was just ahead of his time. It's so rich and expressive, still in that Baroque style, which was, very specific to his time. So I guess I'll stop there because I'm just going to pontificate about all the music that I love if I don't. But those are some of my favorites.
No, that is so great to hear. And I love that you mentioned popular music and other forms outside of classical music because I think sometimes people assume that classical musicians only listen to opera or classical music all the time. And it's so great to have a broad range of your musical style. And I think a lot of the students and faculty here at DePaul do have a broad range of musical styles that they like to explore. And so I'm so glad that you mentioned that.
Certainly.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I think most of us have a pretty natural progression. It's very few, if anybody, if any of us, who wake up one day and say, I think I want to be an opera singer. Just right out of the gates. That's not typically most singers' go-to career aspiration. There's kind of a progression. We fall in love with music because of something we hear on the radio or whatever, something that's really accessible to us without knowing much about music. And then our love for music grows from there. Maybe, like I explained, you get to go see a musical, and that's something that's moving. And so there is for most of us a progression, and I think it's easy to lose sight of where we've come from. Because classical singing is so demanding and so fulfilling. It can be easy to forget about the music that we used to love because we're solely focused on doing this one thing. But I think it's important to keep balance.
Exactly. Now, speaking of different roles that you've sung or pieces that you've sung, what is your favorite role or maybe oratorio or solo that you have sung in your career so far?
I the very first lead role that I ever sang in an opera was Tamino in Die Zauberflöte, and I fell in love with it because I mean I had sung Mozart arias, and but that was the first time I sang a lead Mozart role. Um, and what I fell in love with was two things. That is, that show has arguably some of Mozart's best music that he ever wrote. It is a stunning score. And so I fell in love with the music first. And then as I was learning the role and coming to understand who Tamino was, he goes on this journey of seeking wisdom and enlightenment. And because that's kind of been at the core of my being for my whole life, I knew I wanted to be an educator, and that meant that I had to know as much as I could know and be the best I could be to pass that on to my students. That really has been a big part of who I am. And so finding that out about Tamino and realizing that I had a really basic human connection with that made it a really fun role to portray on stage as well. And because I've been able to go back and visit that role several times, and because of the commonalities that I have, I feel like with Tamino, I can find something new in it every single time while still loving that amazing music. So I think that's probably my favorite role that I've sung is Tamino in Die Zauberflöte. There's a spiritual that Moses Hogan arranged. It's called Give Me Jesus. And anybody who's interested enough in music to listen to this probably knows that spiritual, probably knows that tune. I found that arrangement when I was looking for some music for one of my students. And I sat down at the piano and I played a couple chords and I started singing it. And it's so beautiful. And similar to the way I described bel canto music, that there's something very sort of spare about it. It's not overly ornate. That leaves it up to the singer to really pour expression into and find the richness of. And so that's a song that I have loved singing for a long, long time. When I found it, I put it on so many recitals after that, and anytime I would go out and do recruiting, I would sing it for the students that I was recruiting. And it's a song that I love very much. It's very near and dear to my heart. And then because I am a little more of a concert singer and a recitalist than an opera singer, there's a cycle of songs by Turina, and it's called Homenaje a Lope de Vega. It's 3 songs, and they are really interesting texts, and the writing for the voice is high-flying, acrobatics, fast-moving, super fun stuff for a high tenor to sing, with a kind of that Spanish passion, that sense of duende that we think of in that kind of music. And so putting those two things together, something that's high and wonderful in my voice for me to sing, that also has that earthy, grounded sense of passion and depth of emotion. I love singing those songs as well. So I was looking for these songs because I knew I wanted to sing them, and I couldn't find them anywhere in the US. I found them actually in Italy, and I had them shipped over. And as luck would have it, later on, I had emailed Glenn Dower Jones, who runs Classical Vocal Reprints, and I told him I was looking for those songs. And then he emailed me back. He said, "Oh yeah, I have them. They're $12.95 or something." I paid $90 for those 3 songs to get them shipped over from Italy, and could have gotten them had I known for $13 or something. So because I loved those songs as much as I did and still do, and because I paid $90 for them, I sang them on recitals for years after that, so I got my money's worth. But that experience of singing the same songs for a couple of years, it taught me something as a singer that has bled into my teaching. There came a point where, so I learned the songs, I memorized them, I got up and I sang them, and in my brain the process was, here's my next entrance, here's the next stanza of the poem, this is this interval, this is this high note. It was the musical nuts and bolts going through my brain, and I was being as expressive as I could be. But then the more that I sang them, I remember vividly the one song ends with a nice high B flat, and I used to always think, here comes the B flat, get ready, do the things you have to do technically to sing the B flat. And there came a certain point where B flat wasn't in my brain anymore. It was a sensation in my body, and I knew what to do to create the sensation, and I knew what it was going to feel like when I did it. And my brain imagined that thing before it happened, and it happened every single time. And so in doing those songs over and over and over again, I learned this is why we as teachers tell our students to learn your music so well that you don't have to think about it. because it allows your brain to focus on all of the other more important things than when is my next entrance coming? What are my next words? Is this a perfect fifth or a major sixth? What is this interval? Those kinds of things. Those things aren't that interesting. But when you take the sounds that a composer has prescribed for you as an artist and you make them meaningful noises with the technique that you have, that's interesting for your audience and really fun as a singer. And so I learned from that experience, number one, check with Glendower because you might not have to pay $90 for a song, a set of songs. And number two, learn your music as well as you possibly can so that you can focus on making expressive sounds rather than when the sounds come in time and what they're supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that any singer who has ever experienced that totally knows that that's the goal. We always have that one note or that one part of the piece that you're always thinking about it, but you just want to get to the point where, you're being expressive rather than thinking about, will I do this or will I hit this note? So I'm really glad that you talked about that. I
Yeah.
also love that you talked about Give Me Jesus. I recently performed that piece for the first time at a summer program this summer,
Oh,
and
yay, that's great.
and I fell in love with it as well. It was so beautiful, and I really hope to keep it in my repertoire. It's a beautiful piece.
Do sing it for the rest of your life. It is so beautiful. You did the Moses Hogan arrangement or was it a
Yes.
different arrangement?
Yep. Same arrangement. Yeah. It was
Great.
wonderful.
Hmm.
All right. So now, with everything going on with COVID, what has been keeping you busy in this age of COVID? Different activities? Are you watching any fun TV shows? Doing any cooking or anything?
This has been perhaps the strangest time that any of us will ever live through in human history in our lives. And for that reason, I think that taking care of ourselves is really important, both in terms of keeping your health, trying to stay away from the pandemic as much as possible, but also in terms of our physical health, but also our mental health, making sure that we are doing things for ourselves that keep us sane through this very, very strange time. So for me, I began the pandemic actually by moving here to Chicago, and early on, it was actually in March when I moved, and at that point, there was a lot we didn't know about the virus, and so I made it my goal to go do a cross-country move from Florida to Chicago by myself, with no moving company, with no help from anyone else. And I am so fortunate that I'm able-bodied enough to have done that, but it was really difficult. I packed a trailer, I made 2 trips back and forth, and pulled a trailer up here with my truck. And so my first real pandemic memory, I'm sure years and years from now, is going to be I had to move to a different state in the middle of all this. And so I did that as safely as I could. And that actually gave me a lot to do because when I first got here, I had to, of course, unpack and get settled in, doing the logistics of I need to get an Illinois driver's license and license plates and all of those kinds of things. So that took up a little bit of time early on in the pandemic. And then after I got here and got settled, I started, I've always had a passion for cooking. In fact, when I was going through school, I cooked my way through graduate school at several different restaurants. And so I got here, had the time, and I thought, let me get back to doing some cooking. So I have perfected a recipe for chili. Oh, especially now that it's fall in Chicago. I made my last batch of chili and froze some of it. It's so bad for you, but it is so delicious. And so I've been working on my chili recipe some. I've also been doing some reading, some researching. I've written a couple of articles that have been submitted and worked on some conference presentations. And so putting those together has been interesting, and I've learned a lot about PowerPoint and Zoom and all the technological challenges that we all faced. So overcoming those challenges and learning about those things has taken up some time. Additionally, I have a dog who you might have heard in the background whining a little bit. She's on some medications for an ear infection, and so I think she's a little uncomfortable, but So she takes up a lot of my time and attention. She, of course, has to go on walks throughout the day, and she's my best friend. And so we, we play games together and giving my dog attention and what she needs. That's been something to really keep me anchored and grounded during this time. And so it's been kind of a mix of doing things in my personal life that I found relaxing and enjoyable, as well as continuing to invest in my professional life while trying to wear a mask and wash my hands and stay away from people as much as possible. So,
So now, now that you are living in Chicago, have you been doing any exploring? Do you have any favorite spots or restaurants so far in the Chicago area by DePaul or just in Chicago in general?
great question. So I've tried to be very careful about staying away from people and not being in enclosed spaces without good ventilation. So I haven't been able to do as much exploring as I wanted to. But I have, I love Chinese food, Asian foods. I have one of my grandmothers was Korean. And so I grew up eating Asian foods, and it's always been something I've loved. And there's a place here in my neighborhood. I'm here in Lincoln Park, and there's a place that has the most amazing dumplings I have ever had. And so on occasion, I'll get some dumplings from them. And there's also a park that's about 2 blocks from my condo. And so I take my dog there and we hang out and walk around and, do our dog in the park type activities. And so that's been really fun. I've also become a big Chicago Bears fan because football's on TV now, and I can watch the Bears play, and so that's been fun. I remember as a kid, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and so most of my family we were fans of the Washington, now called the Washington football team. They're in the process of changing their name to be more current, modern, inclusive, and not pejorative to the Native American community. And so the Washington football team, we were big fans of when I was a kid. And I remember watching in the 1980s the Washington football team, who were then called something different, and the Chicago Bears. That was a big rivalry. And so it's been fun to move to Chicago and become a Bears fan, learning my neighborhood, finding good food for sure. It's been a great experience so far. And I cannot wait for things to get back to normal and for me to be able to do some of the more normal things that I had hoped to be able to do this summer. Being here as a student, being in Chicago, and being able to take in the quality of performances that happen here in the city, I bet that's been a terrific part of your experience.
Yes, and it's really great too because um, students get discounted tickets too. So it's really convenient to be able to see this music, especially on a college budget. But I'm really glad that you're enjoying Chicago and that you're, exploring around. And hopefully, yeah, things will open up soon, fingers crossed, and you'll be able to explore Chicago and the Lincoln Park area a little bit more.
Indeed.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Chandler. It has been so wonderful talking about you and learning all about you and just how you have made your way to DePaul and your experiences so far in Chicago. It's so wonderful to have you. And um, these talks are just so inspiring. And it's really wonderful to learn about those that you're able to work with here at DePaul.
Georgie, thank you. The honor has been mine. I have enjoyed our conversation very much. And let me just say a quick final word that I feel truly honored to be here at DePaul. It's a wonderful place for the kind of environment that it is, the kind of colleagues that I have. If you look at the website, and of course you know this because you're here as a student, but the voice faculty here is stocked with incredibly high level singers, active professional singers. And that is really unusual. When you add to that the fact that the environment here is one in which we exist, it's very positive, it's very nurturing, it's very collegial. That's really unusual. It's something very unique that DePaul has to offer. So I am so glad to be here. I have enjoyed talking to you very much. And hopefully, like you said, we will be able to get back to normal one of these days.